The very instant my husband discovered he was inheriting a fortune, he announced, "Pack your things. I'm a rich man now." He promptly threw me out and initiated divorce proceedings. I signed all the papers with composure, but when the attorney began to read the will, he collapsed to his knees right before my eyes. "Welcome to Twists of Destiny. Before we start, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. We're eager to hear from you. We truly hope you enjoy this." Gripping tale. Kezia's day began with her alarm at 5:30 in the morning. Outside, it was completely dark, save for the street lamps casting a faint illumination on the snow-blanketed courtyard. She stretched quietly, careful not to disturb Tavarius, and cautiously slid from beneath the covers. The biting cold instantly nipped at her bare feet. The radiators in their drafty, two-bedroom south side flat were producing almost no warmth. Inside the bathroom, Kezia stared at her own reflection. Though only 32, she appeared to be at least 40. The dark rings beneath her eyes were beyond what any amount of makeup could conceal. The first faint wrinkles had appeared around her mouth, and her hair cried out for a touch-up and a new braid. Yet she lacked both the time and the funds for a salon visit. She rubbed a hand across her face, then splashed it with icy water and began her morning work routine. "Up at this hour again?" Tavarius's disgruntled voice echoed from their bedroom. "I need to be at my job by 8. Tav." Kazia replied gently, slipping into a worn plaid sweater. "Go back to sleep." "How can I possibly get any rest with you causing such a commotion before sunrise?" he complained, rolling over to face the wall. Kezia bit down on her lip. It wasn't always like this. 5 years back, when they'd first moved in, Tavarius would rise with her. He would see her off with a kiss, calling her the most beautiful woman alive. He'd even make her coffee while she was getting ready, kiss her forehead, and vow to have supper waiting for her. But these days, every single thing she did seemed to grate on his nerves. Down in the kitchen, she hurriedly prepared instant coffee and consumed a piece of toast with cheese as she stood beside the windowsill. A proper breakfast was a luxury she couldn't afford. By 7 in the morning, she was already heading out the door to get the bus for the community health center, where she was employed as a front desk administrator. Her work was repetitive and draining, taking calls, booking appointments, and handling insurance, complaints, and difficult people. The salary was modest, around $2,800 monthly, but it was reliable, and at the moment, it was their only consistent income for the household. As for Tavarius's work, well, Kazia wasn't sure what to call it. He had spent years trying to build his own business empire for the last 3 years. First, an online supplement shop, followed by a consulting firm, and then a computer repair business. None of his ventures ever took off. The savings they scraped together for a vacation, a new refrigerator, or for home repairs, all of it was funneled into his next grand scheme. Yet there were never any returns. The most he ever contributed was perhaps $500 or $600 in a month, and that was only on rare occasions. "I'm creating a future for us," he'd always say. Whenever Kazia meekly suggested he get a regular 9 to 5, even just for the short term. "You simply don't grasp how business operates, Kazia. It requires investment. It demands patience. Just look at Jay-Z. Think of the huge moguls. They all gambled big." So Kezia persevered. She even got herself a second job. A second job in the evenings. After the clinic, she handled remote bookkeeping for small businesses tethered to the computer. Until midnight, scrutinizing other people's invoices and balancing ledgers simply to make ends meet at the end of the month. To cover the rent, the power bill, the internet purchase, groceries, and ensure Tavarius had funding for his next genius idea. That gig earned her another $1,500 or $2,000 based on the client volume, sometimes more if luck was on her side. The bus was running late and Kazia barely clocked in at the start of her shift. The whole day passed in a disorienting blur of chaos. Non-stop ringing, phones, distressed patients, and demanding doctors. By lunch, a splitting headache had taken hold, but it was too early to head home. After work, she needed to swing by the grocery store, get food for dinner, and then settle in at the computer. She had a pressing order to complete a financial report due the next evening. She finally arrived home around 9 p.m. Her arms burned from the heavy grocery bags. Her feet were aching after a full day of standing. Tavarius was sitting on the sofa with his laptop scrolling intently through something. In the kitchen, a pile of dirty dishes from lunch was stacked in the sink. Crumbs were strewn across the table beside an empty tea mug and a torn-open package of cookies. Kezia wordlessly removed her coat, walked into the kitchen, and began washing the dishes. "Kez, you could at least take a breather first," Tavarius commented, not looking up from his screen. "You always do too much." "If I don't wash them, who is going to?" she answered, exhausted, while soaping up a plate. "Man, whatever. They could be done later. The house isn't going to fall apart in one night." Kezia said nothing. It was futile. They used to prepare dinner together, clean up together, and plan their weekends together. He once spent whole Saturdays helping her reorganize the closet or paint the walls. Now she felt like nothing more than a maid in her own house. She finished the dishes, wiped down the table, put the groceries away, then heated up some leftover soup for herself and sat down to eat. Tavarius wandered into the kitchen, poured tea from the kettle she had prepared. That morning, took an apple from the fruit bowl and returned to the sofa. "Tav, let's go do something this Sunday," Kezia proposed, tentatively finishing her soup. "Maybe just a walk through Millennium Park or along the lakefront. We haven't been anywhere together for so long. It's been at least 3 months now." "My head's in the business?" He waved her off, his eyes fixed to the screen. "I don't have time for walks right now. Can't you see that I'm in a critical phase? I'm on the edge of a massive breakthrough. Dion found an investor who is willing to put money into our project. I need to prep the pitch deck, finalize the business plan, and you're over here talking about walks." Kezia went silent. A massive breakthrough. She had heard those same words hundreds of times during the last 3 years. The breakthrough never materialized. Just another investor, another project, another series of promises. She finished her soup, washed the bowl, and went to her computer. She needed to finish reports for 2 separate clients before morning. She sat at the desk in the corner of their cramped bedroom, switched on the eye lamp, and lost herself in the numbers. Through the wall, the TV blared. Tavarius had turned the game on. Every few moments, he would yell something, commenting on the action. This was the pattern of her days. Day after day, week after week, month. For a month, her life was a cycle of work and home. She had no memory of buying anything new for herself. Her jeans were threadbare at the knees. Her boots were desperately in need of repair. The sole was peeling away, soaking her feet in slush. But there was not enough money for a new winter coat. Tavarius had requested $1,000 last month for equipment for his latest venture, and she had been unable to refuse. Kezia saw how Tavarius was changing. He started looking at her with a clear disdain, as if she were a burden, an obstacle, the very thing preventing him from achieving his own success. "You should really join a gym," he remarked one evening as she changed for bed. "You've really let yourself go. Just look at you." Kezia froze, her t-shirt clutched in her hands. She stood there in her old bra and the sweatpants she wore around the house, looking at him, not believing what she was hearing. "Tav, I'm just so tired," she said quietly. "I have no time for a gym. I work from 8 o'clock in the morning until midnight." "Excuses?" he dismissed, scrolling through his phone's feed. "Everybody finds time if they really want to. Look at Shanice, Dion's wife. Now she keeps herself tight. Gym nails are done. Always looking sharp. And you know what I mean." He trailed off, but Kezia understood him perfectly. She got into bed, turned to face the wall, and clenched her fists tightly under the covers. Tears stung her throat, but she held them back. She was not going to cry. She was just exhausted, that was all. Tomorrow was another day. New work. New worries, and tears were not going to change a thing. 1 week later, a similar situation unfolded. They were in the kitchen. Kezia was making dinner, frying some burger patties and boiling potatoes. Tavarius scrolled through a site on his tablet. You know Kez real wives create an environment for their husbands to succeed, he stated suddenly. Take Marcus's wife. She doesn't have a job. She's at home cooking cleaning so he can handle his business in peace. Marcus has his own firm that is actually profitable. Keziah responded tiredly, flipping a patty. How are we supposed to live if I'm not working? See, this is exactly why nothing works for me, Tavarius flared up. Because I'm forced to think about the bills, about you being tired from your job, about how miserable you are. I cannot focus. Tavarius. What? If you brought in real money, I could focus on development, but instead it's always, we don't have enough. Always penny. Pinching. How am I supposed to think big while you're counting every single dime? Keziah switched off the stove. The patties were done. She quietly moved them to a plate and set it on the table. Tavarius took one bit into it. Too salty, he grumbled. She tasted it herself. The salt was fine. He was just picking a fight because he was angry, because he blamed her for his failures. She was simply the easiest target. Winter passed into spring. Keziah continued working her job, still carrying the weight of it all on her shoulders. Meanwhile, Tavarius grew colder and more distant. Some nights he failed to come home at all, claiming he was staying late at his friend Dion's place to discuss business ideas. Until late, so it was easier to crash there. Keziah never asked. She was too afraid to hear the truth, scared to find out about someone else that he only lived with her now from pure habit and for pure convenience, a free place, hot meals, and clean clothes. And then something happened that turned everything on its head. On an ordinary Tuesday evening in May, Keziah had just arrived home from work, putting a pot of rice on to boil, and began dicing vegetables for a salad. Tavarius was seated in his customary place on the sofa, though this time his gaze wasn't on his laptop. He was on the phone, speaking softly, yet there was a peculiar current of excitement in his voice. Yes, I received it, he muttered. Yeah, I will absolutely be there tomorrow. At what time? 11 in the morning. All right, I'll be there. I appreciate you telling me. He ended the call, sitting perfectly still for a moment, his eyes fixed on a point on the wall. Then he suddenly sprang up and began pacing the room, wringing his hands. What's going on? Keziah inquired, peering from the kitchen with a knife in her hand. Tavarius spun around. A peculiar smile danced across his lips. It wasn't sad nor mournful, but avaricious. My granddaddy passed away, he announced. Keziah winced. The knife nearly fell from her grasp. Tavarius's grandfather, Eustace Vance, had been very old. He was nearing 90, if she recalled correctly. They had only met him a few times throughout their years together. The elderly man resided in Indianapolis, roughly a 3-hour drive from them. He hardly spoke with family, but even so, it was a death. Tav, I am so very sorry. She started drying her hands on a towel as she moved toward him. What happened? Had he been ill? Sorry. Tavarius let out an odd chuckle, a sound completely devoid of any sorrow. Yes, of course. It's sad. He was 88 years old, but that is not the important part. His lawyer contacted me. It seems my granddaddy left a will, and I am mentioned in it. Kezia blinked not, instantly grasping his implication. A will? Yes. Tavarius clenched his hands, his eyes shining with a manic glint. He left me an inheritance. That means there is something of value. I know he had an apartment. I recall a 3-bedroom in the downtown area. Perhaps there's more, like other property or even money and bank accounts. I'm seeing the lawyer tomorrow to learn all the details. He began to pace about the room, rubbing his palms together like a shopkeeper who had just sealed a profitable transaction. At last. Finally, things are looking up for me. Do you see, Kez? This is fate. It's a divine sign. I kept telling you it would all work out for me, that all we needed to do was wait. Kezia just stood there observing him. A part of her recoiled and stung with pain. This was his reaction to his own grandfather's passing, not with any sorrow, not with sadness, but with elation over a possible windfall. His very own flesh and blood had just passed, and he was celebrating. The money. "Perhaps we should arrange the funeral first," she suggested softly. "Give him a proper send-off." "My Auntie Varys. We'll take care of that." Tavarius dismissed with a wave of his hand. She lived close to him in Indy. They spoke their whole lives. She can handle it. My priority is the inheritance. The lawyer mentioned the will reading is the day after tomorrow. I have to be there at 11 a.m. He was buzzing with energy all evening. He couldn't stay still, pacing back and forth, phoning his friends to share the news. His story was the same for each of them. "Granddaddy's gone, left a will. I'm about to be rich." The pot of rice on the stove boiled over. All the water evaporated and the grains began to burn. Keziah shut off the gas, tossing the pot's ruined contents into the trash, and simply retreated to the bedroom. She had no appetite for dinner. A knot formed in her throat, and a heavy emptiness filled her chest. She could not fall asleep for a long while that night. She just lay there staring the ceiling while Tavarius's excited chatter with yet another friend carried from the next room. Her mind drifting to how it all had changed. When she'd fallen for him 5 years prior, he was a different man, so kind, attentive, and caring. Their paths first crossed at a friend's birthday, where he had seemed so genuine, so unguarded. Dated for 1 year a time she remembered as the happiest of her life. He'd bring her flowers just because and take her to the cinema and make her breakfast. They would dream together of a family of children, of a home they would one day build. And then they started living together and it felt as if something fractured. Initially it was subtle, small shifts, then more and more. He grew colder. She grew quieter. He became demanding. She submissive. And now, after 5 whole years, later she lay in the darkness, realizing she no longer knew the man beside her. Over the following 2 days, Tavarius was practically buzzing with anticipation. He was endlessly crunching numbers on a calculator, searching for real estate prices in Indianapolis, browsing condo listings, and estimating the value of a 3-bedroom place downtown. He vocalized his plans. "I'm finally getting a proper car, not this junk heap. I'll get a real office space in a prime spot. We will go to the ocean. Or better still, Europe. I have always wanted to see Paris. Tav, don't count your chickens before they hatch." Keziah attempted to bring him back to earth during dinner. "You have no idea what's in the will." "I know exactly what's in it." He cut in, arrogantly gesturing with his fork. "I'm his only grandson. Granddaddy has no other direct descendants. Auntie Varys is his wife's sister, not even a blood relative. It means everything comes to me. It is just logical." He sipped his tea, his gaze on her becoming cold and appraising, like she was an object he was evaluating, deciding whether to keep or discard. "You know, Kez," he began, "perhaps it really is time you considered your appearance," he said abruptly. "Once I get this inheritance, I'll need a wife who fits that new status. Just look at you. You dress as if you're digging in some thrift store's bargain bin. Your hair's not done. No manicure. I would be ashamed to take you out anywhere decent." Keziah felt a hot flush rise to her cheeks. Her hands began to shake. She carefully set her cup on the table, fearing she might drop it. "The reason I dress this way is because we lack the money," she stated, struggling to keep her voice from wavering. "I put every single cent towards our expenses and your ventures." "See, there you go." Tavarius winced, always laying on the guilt. "It's not my fault you can't budget or save money. A real woman would figure out how to manage looking good while also running the household." Keziah opened her mouth to protest, but the words caught in her throat. Tavarius was already rising from the table and exiting the kitchen, leaving his dirty plate right where it was. She was left sitting there alone, gazing at the cold tea and the dinner leftovers, sensing that something deep inside of her had finally and irrevocably shattered. She went to the mirror in the hall and studied her reflection for a long moment. In truth, She did not look her best. A pilled old sweater, faded jeans she had owned for 3 years now, and unkempt hair with roots, showing a weary face marked by deep shadows beneath her eyes. But was that really her fault? She was working 2 jobs just so he could play at being a businessman. She sacrificed everything just so they could survive, always purchasing the cheapest brands. She had scrimped and saved, and this was her reward. He was ashamed of her, claiming she no longer suited his new standing. Keziah retreated to the kitchen, slumping at the table. With trembling hands, she reached out and poured herself some water, taking small sips to still her nerves. She had to regain her composure. Perhaps it was only the pre-inheritance anxiety. Maybe once the excitement faded, once the novelty wore off, Tavarius would return to who he was. Perhaps things were still salvageable. But in the deepest recess of her heart, a devastating truth had already taken root. Nothing could be recovered. The Tavarius she'd adored for 5 years had vanished. Or perhaps he was never really there at all. Morning broke with Tavarius prowling the apartment like a trapped creature. He was awake before Keziah, a rare occurrence indeed. Normally he would sleep until 10 or even midday, but today, at 7:30, he stood attentively before the mirror, fastidiously grooming his hair and scrutinizing the state of his shirt. "How do I look?" he questioned as Keziah emerged from the bedroom. "A tie? No, that would be overkill. It is not a job interview. Still, it is a major meeting. Perhaps a tie then." Keziah observed him. He was in his finest shirt, a pristine white one purchased 2 years back for a celebration. His trousers were respectable too, black. He'd polished his formal shoes to a brilliant shine. "It's fine," she murmured. "You look quite good." "Of course I look good," he muttered, appraising his reflection from every angle. "This is a huge day. I finally learn how much my share is." He skipped breakfast, gulping down coffee that burned his tongue. His nerves were frayed, though he fought to conceal it. His gaze darted to his watch, then his phone, then back to his watch. "When do you have to go?" Keziah inquired, pouring her tea. "By 11, though I'm heading out early to ensure I'm punctual around 10 or 9:30 for traffic. Should I accompany you?" she offered with hesitation. "For moral support?" Tavarius spun on her, his face aghast as though she'd said something foul. "For what?" he snapped. "This is Vance family affairs. You have no part in this." Keziah drank her tea, feeling the scalding liquid sear her throat. Family affairs. The words meant she wasn't family despite their 5 years sharing a home. "All right," was her only reply. "Yeah, fine. Aunt Varys will be there with her sermons. She has a real knack for ruining the mood. I don't need more pressure." He gave the mirror a final glance, adjusted his shirt, and snatched his jacket. "I'm leaving. I'll return when I'm done. May have to review papers with the lawyer tonight." And with that, he was gone. Not even a goodbye. The door slammed shut, leaving Keziah alone in the silent apartment. She drank the rest of her now cold tea, cleaned the cup, and prepared for her job. The day ahead felt endless. At the clinic, the hours crept by at a torturous pace. Keziah handled calls, robotically registered patients, but her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. She replayed what might be unfolding at the lawyer's office, what was to come, how. Their lives might shift if Tavarius inherited a fortune. Would he return to being kind and thoughtful again, or fully become the conceited stranger from recent months? As she took her lunch break, she found herself. She attempted to call him, but it went unanswered. Her text, "How's it going?" was marked as read, but met with silence. No reply. Arriving home around 7 p.m., she found Tavarius gone. The apartment was hollow, filled with a quiet emptiness. Keziah warmed up last night's soup, ate, and cleaned up before settling at her computer. Work was a constant pressure. She had to complete a report, but her mind drifted. She strained to hear any sound in the hall, anticipating the turn of the doorknob. Tavarius didn't get back until 9:30. Keziah heard the lock turn, then his footsteps in the hall. She pushed back from the computer and moved to meet him. "Well," she prompted, desperately trying to decipher the look on his face. Tavarius paused in the doorway, a strange smirk playing on his lips. Not happy, not pleased, but almost predatory. Everything is perfect, he declared, shrugging off his jacket. Even better than I hoped. Keziah took a cautious step closer. What happened? An inheritance. Tavarius strode into the living room and collapsed on the sofa, leaning his head back. 3 bedrooms, 1,200 square feet, right in the heart of Indianapolis. A lakefront property in the suburbs a bank account stocks in. Some company my grandpa bought, who knows when. The lawyer said, all told, we're looking at $2 million, maybe more. We need to get an appraiser to value everything. Keziah perched on the edge of the armchair. $2 million. It was staggering money, the kind she had never allowed herself to imagine. Good heavens, she whispered. It's an absolute fortune, Tavarius said for her. I'm rich now, Kez. It's finally done. No more of this dump, no more scraping by. I'm buying myself a luxury, condo, a Benz. I'm starting the business I never had the funds for. Everything's changing, he was saying. I, not we. Keziah noted the shift but held her tongue. When does it all become final? She asked. The attorney said, a week or two. Just need to file some papers, assess the estate, but it's all formalities. The bottom line is the money is mine. Rising from the sofa, he crossed to the window. He stood there, gazing out at the nighttime city, at the glowing lights. He then turned, fixing Keziah with a long, evaluating stare. You know, Kez, I have a lot to consider tonight, he said suddenly, his voice carrying a strange cold quality. So I'm going to head over to Dion's, hang out and talk it over with him. I'll be late. Don't wait up. And with that, he was gone. And he left, slamming the door once more. Keziah stayed seated in the armchair, her eyes on the empty space her husband had just occupied. And within her, a cold, cloying feeling of dread began to spread. For the subsequent 2 days, Tavarius was barely ever home. He'd get in late at night after Keziah was already in bed and leave before sunrise. They barely spoke. He was completely absorbed by his thoughts, by his own agenda, and it was clear she had no place in his plans. Then what she dreaded most finally happened. It was Sunday, close to noon. Keziah was in the kitchen with her coffee, reading the news feed on her phone. Tavarius was home, but he'd been shut in the bedroom all morning, busy with something on the computer. Abruptly, he came out, a look of steely resolve on his face. Keziah, we need to talk, he stated, and his tone sent an icy chill down her spine. About what? She asked, lowering her phone slowly. Tavarius entered the kitchen, retrieved a glass, poured water, drank it all down, then turned to her and declared, I've been doing a lot of thinking these last few days, and I've come to a single realization. You and I were completely stagnant. We've just been going through the motions for years, and I refuse to live that way any longer. What are you saying? Kezia rose from her chair, her heart beginning to pound. I mean, I have to move on to begin a new life. And you, Kez, you're the anchor that's pulling me down to the bottom. Tarius, what is this? Her voice quivered. I'm saying this is over. I'm filing for a divorce. The words seemed to hang in the air as Kezia struggled to process what he'd said. A divorce. He wants a divorce now, just after the money came through. Are you actually serious? She finally squeezed out. Completely serious, Tavarius replied without emotion. I've considered every angle. This is the best choice for the both of us. You'll find somebody more your speed, and I'll begin my new life. We've shared a home for 5 years, Kezia whispered, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. 5 years, Tavarius. I was the one supporting you. I worked 2 jobs to fund your ambitions. And I am grateful, he cut in dismissively. Truly. But gratitude is not the same as love. And as for love, it's been long gone from this relationship. Let's be honest. How can you even say that? Because it's the truth. We became a habit, but that doesn't obligate us to a lifetime together. People evolve, Keziah. I've evolved, and I want something different now. Kezia collapsed back into her chair, her legs refusing to support her. A thick fog clouded her mind, a pain piercing her chest so sharply, it felt as if her heart might actually shatter. You waited for the money to come in, she said softly, her gaze fixed downward. It's why you never said a word before this. You just waited. Tarius remained quiet, and his silence was more damning than any confession. I've already packed your things, he finally stated. They're in the hall. 1 suitcase and 2 bags. It's all there. Your clothes, cosmetics, books. Come back for the remainder of your things whenever you would like. Kezia lifted her head to meet his gaze. He stood there, arms folded across his chest, staring down at her. His expression held no remorse, no trace of guilt, only a cold and calm detachment. You're kicking me out, she questioned, her voice sounding alien and shattered. You mean right this second? The sooner it's done, the better, he replied. No point in prolonging this. It only complicates things. She got to her feet, legs shaking, and shuffled toward the hallway. And there, just as he'd said, stood her suitcase and 2 large duffel bags. He had really gone and packed her life away. While she was at work yesterday, he had methodically folded her clothes and her belongings, getting ready to cast her out. I've also prepared the divorce documents, Tavarius stated as he followed her into the hall. He retrieved a stack of papers from a nearby table and presented them to her. It's all very straightforward. No property claims by mutual agreement. All you have to do is sign. I'll handle the filing myself. In a month, everything will be official. Keziah accepted the documents with trembling hands. Her eyes glanced over the lines, unable to focus, unable to read as the letters blurred together. I don't have any need for you anymore, Tavarius stated, and a taunting quality entered his tone. I'm a wealthy man now. Do you understand? My life is about to be new, beautiful, and successful, and you can stay right here in your pathetic, impoverished little world. It's where you belong. He chuckled, staring at her ashen face. Did you think that I would actually remain with you seriously, that I would want to pull you up into my new world? Just look at yourself. You're unremarkable, Kezia, a complete nobody, and you'll never be the type of woman a successful man actually wants. Each word struck her like a physical blow. Kezia stood there, absorbing the tirade from the man she had given 5 years of her life to, as he crushed her spirit, shamed her, and broke her. And as for your so-called sacrifices, Tavarius sneered, making air quotes, that was your own decision. No one made you slave away at 2 jobs. You chose that path yourself. So don't you dare come complaining to me now. Kezia stared at him for a long beat, and something inside her finally fractured. The hurt remained, but a new feeling settled over it like ice, a cold, unyielding dignity. Where do I sign? She asked, her voice perfectly level. For a second, Tavarius looked baffled. He clearly anticipated tears, pleading, and a complete meltdown. But Keziah stood there, composed, her spine rigid, her gaze on him empty and unwavering. Right here, he jabbed a finger at it, a line on the bottom of the page. And also, here on the second page. Kezia took the offered pen and signed her name with a firm hand. Once, then twice, it was done. 5 years of her existence erased by 2 strokes of ink. Good, Tavarius grunted, snatching the papers. Excellent. Quick, no fuss. I always knew you were a smart girl. He folded the documents, placing them inside a folder, then pivoted to the door and yanked it open. Well, have a great life. He tossed over his shoulder with a smirk. Or as they say, good luck finding another fool to take care of you. Kezia wordlessly lifted her suitcase and one of the bags. They were incredibly heavy, but she showed no sign of the strain. She crossed the threshold, then returned for the second bag. Tavarius was in the doorway, lounging against the frame, watching her with that disgusting, self-satisfied grin. You know something, Kaz, he drawled as she retrieved the final bag. I almost pity you. You're a decent enough woman, really, just not in my league. You get me? I'm playing in a different division now. Kazia paused, turning her head at the threshold, and met his eyes. She took one last look at the man she had once adored and realized absolutely nothing was left. No love, not even hatred, just a hollow void. "Goodbye, Tavarius," she said, her voice soft but resolute, and walked out without a backward glance. The door slammed shut behind her, followed by the sound of his cruel, triumphant laughter. He was mocking her retreat, relishing in his perceived victory. Keziah descended the stairs with her heavy luggage and finally emerged onto the street. It was a stunningly bright spring day. The sun shone warmly and birds sang, completely indifferent to her world falling apart. She stood in the middle of it all with 2 bags and a suitcase, without a home or a husband, her heart utterly shattered. But her head was held high. She pulled out her phone and dialed Tasha, her best friend. "Tasha, it's me," she managed when her friend answered. "Can I stay with you? I need a place for a few days. I've left Tavarius." Her voice finally faltered on the last 2 words, but she forced herself to stay composed. This was not the time to fall apart. Later. The tears would come later. The pain would come later. Right now, she simply had to get to Tasha's, to a sanctuary where she could breathe and decide what to do next. "Oh, honey, of course. Get over here now." Tasha's concerned voice echoed through the phone. "What happened?" "You can tell me everything when you arrive. I'll be waiting." Kazia requested a car and loaded her belongings into the trunk, and then she settled into the back seat. As the car pulled away, the once familiar streets began to float by like a distant memory. Outside the window, she finally let her eyes shut. Only then, in the private darkness of her own mind, did the first tears begin to fall. Tasha was waiting at the door of her 1-bedroom apartment with hot tea and a warm embrace. She didn't ask any needless questions. She simply helped carry her things inside, settled her on the couch, and pressed a mug into her hands. "Just drink. You can tell me later," she said, taking a seat beside her. Keziah recounted everything, the inheritance and the events of the past few months, about how Tavarius had thrown her out just today, laughing as she left. She spoke softly without any tears, as she'd exhausted them all in the elevator. Only a deep, hollow emptiness was left inside. "What a snake," Tasha hissed, once Keziah had finished. "He's a complete dog, Kez. I always knew something wasn't right with him, but you loved him, so I held my tongue." "I really did love him," Kazia replied softly. "But I guess that wasn't enough." For the first few days, she was merely existing. She slept on the pull-out sofa, went to her job, returned home, ate something, and then went back to sleep. On autopilot, her mind blank. Tasha attempted to get her to speak, to offer a distraction, but Kazia just shook her head and withdrew further into herself. Her phone remained silent. Tavarius never called, never texted, as though she'd never been a part of his life. Then on the 4th day, a call came from an unknown number. "Kazia Vance?" a man's voice inquired when she picked up. She had taken his last name. "Yes, speaking. This is the Hightower Law Firm. My name is Thaddeus Sterling, an attorney here. I'm representing the estate of the late Eustace Vance. I must meet with you about the inheritance." Kezia found herself completely confused. "But I'm not related," she stated. "He's my ex-husband's grandfather. We're divorced." "Well, the paperwork is still being processed, and that is exactly why I need to see you with such urgency." A distinct sense of urgency was in the man's tone. "This is very important. Can you come in today, perhaps around 3? Kezia glanced at her watch. It was 11 o'clock in the morning. She was just preparing for work. "I can be there at 6 o'clock after my shift," she offered. "Excellent. We will expect you at 6 o'clock. Do you have the address?" 1200 South Michigan Avenue, Suite 305. "Yes, I will be there." Throughout the day, Kezia couldn't stop thinking about the call. Why was she summoned to the lawyer's office? How could she possibly be involved with Tavarius's grandfather's inheritance? She hardly knew the old gentleman, having met him just twice. At 6:15 in the evening, she stood before the office door, paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and then entered. Inside the reception area, a middle-aged woman in a very formal suit was seated at a desk. "Good evening. My name is Keziah Vance. I had an appointment. Please go right in. They are expecting you." The woman gestured toward the office door. Kezia entered. Seated at a large desk was a man in his 50s with graying hair and a sharp, attentive gaze. And over in a chair near the window sat an older woman dressed in black, wearing a church hat. Keziah recognized her immediately. Was Auntie Varys the sister of his grandmother whom Tavarius had mentioned? Standing beside her against the wall was none other than Tavarius himself. He appeared pale, his eyes nervously flicking between the lawyer and Keziah. The moment she walked in, he flinched as if he wanted to speak, but then remained silent. "Miss Vance, please take a seat," the attorney said, gesturing to the empty chair across from his desk. She sat, setting her purse on her lap. Her heart was pounding somewhere high in her throat. "My name is Thaddeus Sterling. I'm responsible for the estate of Eustace Vance," the lawyer started. "It was imperative that I find you with all speed, because a particularly delicate situation has arisen." He opened a folder on the desk, removing several sheets of paper. "The truth is, the deceased's last will contained a provision which I only mentioned to the heir in general terms during our initial meeting, but it is now imperative to read it in full before all interested parties." Tavarius's fists clenched tightly. Keziah noticed it peripherally, but kept her eyes fixed firmly on the lawyer. "I shall now read the full text of the inheritance clause," Attorney Sterling continued, donning his glasses. Quote, "All of my property, including the apartment at 8 Central Street, the Lake House estate in rural Indiana, and funds in Chase Bank accounts, as well as the complete stock portfolio, I bequeath to my grandson Tavarius Vladimir Vance. However, he may receive this inheritance only by fulfilling the following condition at the time of claiming the inheritance. Tavarius Vance must be legally married to his current spouse Keziah Vance continuously for a period of no less than 1 year from the date of my death." The lawyer paused, peering over his glasses at Tavarius. "Furthermore, in the event the marriage is terminated before the expiration of the specified term, or if at the time of my passing, Tavarius Vance is not married to Keziah Vance, all the aforementioned assets shall be transferred in full to Keziah Vance, a person who has demonstrated true nobility and dignity." A heavy silence filled the office. Keziah did not immediately comprehend what she had heard. The words trickled in slowly, as if through cotton. "The inheritance goes to her if their marriage is dissolved, and they had just finalized the divorce documents." That is impossible," Tavarius choked out, stepping towards the desk. "That can't be possible. Granddaddy wouldn't write that." "This will was drafted 2 years ago," the lawyer stated calmly. "Notarized properly and signed in the presence of witnesses. It's completely legal." "But why?" Tavarius gripped his head. "Why did he do that? I'm his grandson, his only one." Auntie Varys rose with effort from her chair, looking at Tavarius with sorrow. "Because Eustace saw your true nature," she stated quietly but firmly. 2 years ago, when he came for his last visit to you both in Chicago, he stayed with you for a few days. Remember?" Tavarius was silent, his face turning pale. "He witnessed how you treat Keziah," the old woman continued. "How you dominate her, how you exploit her working 2 jobs. He saw that she is a kind woman and you are selfish and callous. And that's when he decided to change the will. He came to my office," the attorney picked up. "He said he wanted to protect an honorable person, that if you stayed married for at least 1 year after his passing, it meant you two needed each other in the end, and the inheritance would be yours. But if you divorced, it meant Keziah deserved restitution for all the years she withstood your relationship." Tavarius slumped into a chair. covering his face with his hands. "When did you file?" the lawyer asked, turning through the papers. "I filed the application the day before yesterday," Tavarius answered in a hollow voice. "Expedited. I paid extra to have it finalized quickly, and the divorce is already registered." The lawyer nodded. "Yesterday at 3 o'clock, here's the stamp in the database, meaning the will's condition has been breached. The marriage was terminated less than 1 year following the testator's passing. As a result, the will dictates that the entire estate now transfers to Keziah Vance." Keziah remained perfectly still, her mind reeling. It felt surreal. $2 million. The condo, the lake house, it all belonged to her now. Not Tavarius's, the man who had laughed while throwing her out of their home. Hers. "No." Tavarius choked out, leaping to his feet. "No, that belongs to me. That is my inheritance. I am his grandson. I have the claim." "You had the claim," the lawyer corrected him. "Up until the very moment you finalized the divorce from your wife. That right has now transferred to her. This is the final wish of the deceased, and it is being carried out in full accordance with the law." Tavarius whirled to face Keziah, his eyes blazing with a desperate gleam. "Kaz," he pleaded, stepping closer to her. "Kaz, please listen. This is all a huge mistake, a moment of foolishness. I didn't mean any of what I said to you then. I was just under so much stress, you understand, with this whole inheritance situation. I wasn't thinking clearly." Keziah observed him in silence. "We can fix all of this." He pressed on, suddenly dropping to his knees directly in front of her, right there in the middle of the lawyer's office. "We can remarry. The divorce was only official as of yesterday. We can just undo it, can't we?" He pivoted to the lawyer. "We can file some kind of motion, retract the divorce papers." "You cannot retract a finalized divorce," the lawyer responded matter-of-factly. "You can, however, enter into a new marriage, but that would no longer be the marriage specified in the will. The stipulation of a continuous marital union has been irrevocably broken." "Then we will get remarried regardless." Tavarius seized Keziah's hands. His own palms were damp and unpleasantly sticky. "Do you hear me, Kaz? We will get married again. Everything can go back to how it was. It'll be even better. I promise I'll change. I swear I'll be a different man. I will love you. I will cherish you." Keziah quietly withdrew her hands from his grasp. "Kaz, please." His voice quivered. "Don't do this to me. Don't ruin my life. My grandfather wanted us to stay together. You see, he was testing our bond, and we passed his test. We just weren't aware of it." "You are the one who failed the test," Keziah stated softly, meeting his gaze directly. "You threw me out of our home. You laughed in my face. You called me a plain Jane who would never be worthy of you." "I didn't mean any of it," he cried out. "I was a complete fool. Please forgive me. I'm on my knees begging you. Please forgive me." Keziah rose to her feet. Tavarius stayed on, his knees staring up at her. His eyes were filled with panic and despair, but not a hint of true repentance. There was no shame for his actions, only the raw fear of losing his fortune. "Get up, Tavarius," she said evenly. "Do not humiliate yourself further." "I will do anything," he insisted, clutching at the hem of her coat. "Anything you ask. We will get married, and I will give you half of the inheritance. No, even more than half. You can have 60%, 70%, Kaz, I'm begging you." She calmly detached his hands and took a step back. "I have no desire to marry you," she stated, her voice quiet yet unwavering. "Not for all the money on this earth. No, Tavarius, you destroyed everything that once existed between us. You murdered it with your cruel words, with your mocking laughter as you threw me out on the street. And I have no intention of returning to that life. Not for any price." She then turned to the lawyer. "What must I do to formally claim my inheritance?" Attorney Sterling gave a respectful nod. "You will need to visit the office a few times to sign the necessary documents and process the certificate of inheritance. I will guide you through everything. We can begin immediately if you wish. In your dreams, Keziah retorted. I wish. Terius shot up protesting. Keys, hold on. You can't just seize it all. It's mine. It's my birthright. I'll take this to court. I will find a way to contest the will. You may certainly try, the lawyer said, but the will was drafted. With absolute competence, all legal formalities were observed. The deceased was of sound mind as confirmed by medical records. The court will not rule in your favor. I refuse to accept this, Tavarius shouted. I will get my justice. Justice has already been rendered, Auntie Varys stated quietly, moving toward Keziah. She took her hand and squeezed it, reassuringly. Eustace was a very wise man. He knew precisely what he was doing. My dear, I am so glad it ended this way. You are a good person, and you are more deserving of this inheritance than anyone. Tears started to well in Keziah's eyes for the very first time in days. They were not from pain, but from immense gratitude and relief. Thank you, she whispered. Meanwhile, Tavarius stood motionless in the office, his face pale with vacant eyes. His entire world crumbled in a second. $2 million, the new life, every single one of his plans all turned to ash, and he had no one but himself to blame. You may leave, Mr. Vance, the lawyer announced. Your presence here is no longer required. Miss Vance is to stay. We have details to discuss. Tavarius opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He remained there for a few seconds, then turned and walked from the office. The door clicked shut softly behind him. Keziah finally exhaled. Only then did she realize that she had been holding her breath the whole time. Her legs gave way as she sank down into the chair. Are you all right? The lawyer asked with concern. Some water. No, thank you. It is just, this is all so very unexpected. I understand. But believe me, Eustace made the correct choice. He spoke very highly of you when drafting the will. He said you were the only person in his grandson's circle who is actually worthy of respect. Keziah just nodded, not knowing how to respond. Auntie Varys sat beside her and hugged her shoulders. Stay strong, my dear, she whispered. The worst part is over. Your new life begins now. Yes, Keziah thought. A new life without Tavarius, without the humiliation, without pinching every penny with $2 million she couldn't even properly imagine. It felt like some kind of dream, both scary and beautiful all at once. Kezia left the law office at dusk. In her hands was a folder containing documents. Her head was in a fog, but her chest held a strange, buoyant feeling as if she were floating just above the ground. Everything that had just occurred felt unreal, as if someone else had actually received this inheritance. She felt like a spectator watching from the sidelines. She pulled out her phone and called Tasha. Tasha, you won't ever believe this, she said when her friend finally answered. I became the heiress. It all went to me. $2 million. Silence lingered on the other end of the line. Then a shriek of joy rang out. What, Keziah, are you serious? How? Keziah explained on the way as she walked towards the L train station, telling her about the will, the condition, and how Tavarius had gotten on his knees and pleaded for her to come back to him. She spoke hardly believing her own words. This was simply incredible. Tasha exhaled sharply. Kez, do you grasp what this truly means? You're free. You are rich. You can do anything you want. I haven't processed it yet. Keziah admitted, descending into the subway station. It all feels like a dream. The days that followed flew by in a whirlwind of activity, trips to the lawyer's office, signing documents, meeting with property appraisers, and opening bank accounts. Auntie Vernice assisted with everything, clarifying the details and offering her support. It was revealed that she knew about Eustace's intentions all along. He confided in me when he was writing his will, the older woman revealed. as they sat in a soul food cafe after another lawyer's visit. He said to me, "Vernice, I've watched how that boy mistreats his wife. The boy is selfish and a scoundrel. If he hasn't changed in a year, she'll get compensation for those years." Eustace was a just man. He simply could not abide injustice. Keziah listened, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the elderly man she barely knew. Even in death he protected her and gave her a chance to begin anew. But Tavarius refused to give up. He called her daily. One moment he was begging, the next threatening, then back to begging again. He started coming to Tasha's building and began watching her job. Keziah ignored him walking past, but he would race to catch her and grab her arm. "Kez, you can't treat me like this." He'd scream on the street, ignoring everyone. "We spent 5 whole years together for 5 years. 5 years. Did all that mean nothing? Was it all for nothing to you?" Keziah responded with composure, pulling her hand away. "You answered that question yourself when you kicked me out. I explained I wasn't myself. Please forgive me. One more chance." Yet she continued to walk away from him, and with every instance it grew easier. The ache inside her began to fade, replaced by indifference. Then one evening he appeared at Tasha's front door. Kezia opened it to find him there. Looking exhausted, his shirt wrinkled and his eyes puffy. He was holding a bouquet of wilting roses. "I've been sleeping on these stairs each night," he rasped. "Just waiting for you, Kez. Please, I'm nothing without you. Come back home. We can get married. I'll sign over the whole inheritance to you. Every single penny, just please be with me." Kezia simply looked at him for a long, quiet moment, realizing there was nothing left inside her for him. No pity, no sympathy. He was a stranger. "Tavarius, you don't understand," she stated quietly. "This isn't about the money. It is about you showing me your true colors. You degraded me, tossed me out like I was garbage, and I will not be with a man who could do that. Not ever again." "But everyone makes mistakes," he begged. "I made a huge mistake, I admit it. We can start fresh." "No, Tavarius, we can't. Goodbye." She shut the door in his face. She heard him pounding on it, pleading, and then finally sobbing. Tasha looked over at her friend with pure admiration. "Kez, you did the right thing," she said softly. "I'm so proud of you." Kezia leaned back on the door and shut her eyes. Yes, she had done the right thing. She knew it with every fiber of her being. A week later, the inheritance was finally settled. Kezia was now the legal owner of the downtown condo, the house on the lake, the bank accounts, and the entire stock portfolio, which, according to the experts, was valued even higher than first estimated, with a total worth of around $2.5 million. She sat in her new apartment, a huge, bright space with high ceilings and windows overlooking the courtyard, and still couldn't quite believe this was truly her home now. The furniture was old but of impeccable quality. Paintings decorated the walls while books stood on the shelves. Granddaddy Eustace had spent a long life here, and she could feel his calm and wise spirit in every single corner. Kezia rose and walked over to the window. The city hummed with life below, with people rushing about and cars in motion. She stood there, in this apartment, and for the first time in years, felt an authentic sense of freedom. She then called the clinic and submitted her resignation. She walked away from her second bookkeeping job, too. No more toiling away for 14 hours a day. No more pinching every penny. "So, what are you going to do now?" Tasha inquired as they met for their lunch. "I don't know," Keziah confessed, as she stirred her iced tea. "I want to live for me. Maybe learn something new. I've always wanted to properly learn French. And I want to travel to finally see the world." "You absolutely deserve it," Tasha smiled. "After everything you have endured." Keziah enrolled in French classes and then painting classes. She had loved to draw as a child, but then life had interfered. Now she finally had time for everything. She bought clothes she adored, went to beauty salons, to the hairdresser. Gradually, day by day, she returned to herself to the Keziah she had buried under the weight of fatigue and humiliation. A month later, Auntie Vernice asked her over for tea. They sat there in the kitchen of the old lady's apartment and Keziah spoke about her plans. And I also want to do philanthropy, she said. Help people who fell on hard times like I did. Women who were left with no support. Eustace would approve. Auntie Vernice smiled, pouring the tea into cups. He always said money should create value, not just sit around like a dead weight. You know, Tavarius tried to contest the will. Keziah asked. I heard. But just as the lawyer predicted, the judge threw the case out. The will was ironclad. No grounds for a contest. Keziah nodded. She felt no sense of victory, no satisfaction from this news, just accepting it as fact. How is he now? She asked, surprised by her own curiosity. Terrible, sighed Auntie Vernice. Broke and homeless. He was renting that 2-bedroom place you two lived in, I hear. He is staying on Dion's couch now, trying to find work, but nobody is hiring him. No real experience, and his ego is too large for entry-level work. Word is he took up with some girl, but she left him quickly when she saw he didn't have a dime. Keziah finished her tea. She felt no pity for Tavarius. He got what he deserved. Time moved on. Keziah went to Italy, her first time overseas. She stood on a Venetian bridge and cried from happiness, from the beauty, from knowing she was here, that she was free with her whole life ahead of her. She began to learn to paint and discovered she was quite good at it. She started a small charitable foundation that helped women in crisis situations, paying for divorce lawyers, helping with housing, and with finding jobs. You've changed so much, Tasha said, as they strolled through Grant Park on a warm autumn day. You look younger. I feel reborn, Keziah admitted, as if I lived my whole life in a dungeon and now I see the light. And it was true. She blossomed, getting her hair cut into a chic style, had it colored, and lost weight, not from diets, but because she no longer stress ate. She started, smiling to laugh to live. Then 6 months after that day in the law office, a chance meeting occurred. Keziah was inside a coffee shop, the same one she and Tasha often visited. She ordered a cappuccino and croissant, sitting by the window, reading a book. The door suddenly opened and Tavarius walked inside. He saw her and immediately froze in the doorway. She looked up from her book, meeting his gaze. He had aged, appearing gaunt and thin. He wore a cheap-looking jacket, faded jeans with unwashed hair and stubble on his face. Next to him stood a girl, young, maybe 23, with bleached blonde hair, a cheap weave and caked-on makeup, her voice a sharp complaint in his ear. How much longer, Tavarius? You promised me? A proper restaurant, not this dive. Are you even solvent? I've got it. Candy. I've got it. He mumbled weakly. Tavarius, his gaze locked on Keziah. Things are just tight for a bit. We'll go later. Later, always later, the girl scoffed. All you do is make empty promises. Had I known you were broke, I'd never have bothered. They approached the counter. He ordered 2 coffees, his hands trembling as he searched for loose change in his pockets, carefully counting it. The girl eyed him with disgust. Keziah observed the entire scene, feeling nothing. There he was, the man who'd mocked her, labeled her a plain Jane, and deemed her unworthy. And now he himself had become precisely what he'd accused her of, being, a nobody. The woman beside him stared at him with that same familiar disdain. Kezia, just 6 months prior. Tavarius collected the coffees and turned. Their gazes locked. He took a hesitant step her way, but Keziah simply broke eye contact, returned to her book, and read on as if he didn't exist. Tav, what are you doing? Just standing there, his date demanded. Let's get a table. He paused a moment longer, then dutifully followed her to a table in the corner. From the edge of her vision, Kezia saw them sit, saw the girl's mouth moving in endless complaint about something, while Tavarius sat defeated, hunched over his cup. Kazia finished her coffee and her pastry, left a substantial tip on the table, collected her purse, and strode from the cafe. She never looked back, never approached, simply walked by him as if he were a complete stranger. Outside, the sun was warm, an Indian summer. Kazia paused on the pavement, tilting her face toward the sun with a smile. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Auntie Vernice calling, to invite her to the lake house. The apples were ripe, she said, and ready for harvest. Of course I'll be there, Kazia replied. This weekend. She continued down the street, feeling for the first time in ages no suffocating weight upon her chest, no fear of the future, no lingering shame, no pain. There was only life new, brilliant, full of promise, and it belonged entirely to her. She paused before a travel agency, its window filled with photos of faraway places: Paris, Prague, and Barcelona. Kezia considered it for a moment. Perhaps it was time for a real getaway. Paris, maybe. She recalled Tavarius once saying he wanted to go there once he was wealthy. But he never got rich, and she had. She grinned at her reflection. But no, not Paris. Paris, the city of lights, could wait. For now, she wanted to live fully right here, to enjoy each day, to paint, learn, and help others via her foundation, to just be herself. And Tavarius. That felt like another lifetime belonging to a stranger's story lost to the past. She had shut that door, and she would never ever open it again. She pulled out her phone and dialed Tasha. Hey, let's do something tonight. The theater or that new soul food place on the Riverwalk. I would love that. Her friend rejoiced. You sound so happy today. Just feeling good. Kazia smiled, ending the call and walking on. Along the sunny street, her whole being felt buoyant and bright, as if she were floating instead of walking, as if the entire world had opened before her, awash in color and possibility. And back in the cafe she'd left behind, sat Tavarius, his eyes fixed on the dregs of an empty cup, cursing the day he made money his one and only god. He had decided wealth was more important than love and pride, more valuable than humanity. That, however, was no longer her concern. That was his life, his decision, his outcome to face. And she had her own existence, finally her own, and it was magnificent. That evening, Kazia stood upon the balcony of her condo, a wineglass resting in her hand. Below, the city's lights twinkled brightly. Music played somewhere nearby. People laughed. She looked at the stars and thought about the old man she barely knew, yet he gave her a second chance at life. Thank you, Granddaddy Eustace, she whispered to the dark. Thank you for trusting in me. Thank you for ensuring justice. I will not let you down. I'll live this life with great dignity. The wind seemed to catch her words, carrying them away into the darkness. And Kezia finished her wine, went back into the apartment, and went to bed with a calm heart, without nightmares or anxiety. Only sleep, knowing that a new day would dawn tomorrow. And it would be a wonderful one, because every day was now a wonderful one, for she was free. Finally free. And that was authentic happiness. Did you enjoy this tale? What city are you tuning in from? Let's chat in the comments. If you loved the story, you can show support by sending a super thanks, so I can continue bringing more tales like this to you. Thank you so very much for your wonderful support. I am eager to read your comments on the story. On the screen, you can now see 2 additional life stories that I strongly recommend. There is so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe to it. I'll see you in the next life story. With love and deep respect.